Hi, my name is Hans Fielsch. I'm a captain at Legacy Airlines. I've been here since we were acquired in '98 and we transitioned in '99. I'm currently a captain in Los Angeles on the Airbus. I've been flying commercially for, well, do the math, 32 years. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, 32 years. Wow.
fantastic. First off, let me just say thank you so much for agreeing to allow me to interview today. We've had a fantastic time flying together in the past. We actually have done a podcast together. I remember we were in was it Puerto Rico?
San Juan, Puerto Rico.
San
Yeah.
Juan. Yeah, we went for a run and we got some authentic food and we just had a blast. And then we went back to the hotel and recorded a podcast in person.
And then we had an earthquake.
And then we had an earthquake in the middle of the night.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. So, actually one of my favorite experiences on a layover. So I just, every time I think about it, I'm happy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, me too. It was a good layover.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about today, through the realization that there's an entire generation out there of pilots and aviators, professional aviators at that, even out on the flight line at regionals, that have maybe we're too young to remember the events of 9/11 that happened 20 years ago. And they will only read about it in books or hear it secondhand. They don't know what the industry was like before those events, how everything changed. It's not just security, but the way we do business, the way people think about aviation. What do you recall of the first moment that you heard about the attacks on 9/11?
So I woke up on a layover in Atlanta, and I turned my phone on and immediately knew something was wrong because I had something like 16 or 17 voice messages. And clearly that was unusual. So I listened to the first one. It was my buddy who's a pilot at Southwest Airlines. And he said, "Hans, I hope you're on the ground. Turn the TV on. You've got to watch what's going on. They're flying airplanes into buildings." Which is like, what? Who's flying what into buildings? Doesn't make any sense. And so I'm like, all right, next message. And it was somebody else. "Hans, I hope you're on the ground. I hope you're not one of those airplanes." And it's like, uh-oh, what's going on? So I didn't even bother to go past the second voice message. I turned the TV on, and I turned it on perhaps, I'm thinking maybe 30 to 40 seconds, if my memory is right, before the second building was flown into.
Wow.
So, they were showing it, and I thought, this is a misunderstanding. Somebody must have flown a turboprop or something into the building. I didn't really grasp what really what's going on. And then I watched live with the rest of the nation when that second, when United flew into the second Twin Tower. And I, like everybody else, I just could not believe I could not comprehend. I couldn't relate that was real. It just seemed like special effects or something.
Yeah.
And then, Tony, it was hard to understand. I think if I remember correctly, I was on the 74th floor on a high rise in the tallest building in downtown Atlanta, and I remember looking outside thinking, can you imagine an airplane coming into a building like that? It was just trying to grasp that. I was blown away. It gets a little nebulous from there because I called my fiance, and she was a flight attendant, and she was on the ground supposed to go flying, and she's like, "I've been trying to get a hold of you." The rest of the 15 messages were hers, and just trying to make sense of what was going on. And ironically, I was on the 7.6 at the time, so seeing that airplane being flown that way was pretty close to home, and it was just Tony. I gotta say, I think for me personally, I have to say there was an innocence that I had, honestly, about our profession, our job, the things that we do. You know how much we love our airplanes and our toys. And to see them used like that was such a violation. It was beyond anything I can possibly ever try to put in words. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It absolutely, my world was completely changed, and it's never been the same. I have boycotted 9/11 every single year since. I have absolutely refused to watch any of the stuff that's on TV. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. It's too raw. 20 years later, I can't believe it's been 20 years. 20 years later, it still absolutely blows me away. And it took me, at the time, we were doing a lot of Manhattan layovers. A lot of our flights were slash trips where we'd fly the red eye to New York, go to Manhattan, lay over, and then we would fly a day and a half later. We would fly an early morning flight back to the West Coast. And I remember a lot of our crews later on would take their IDs to Ground Zero and tour Ground Zero. And I can tell you categorically that for, I think it was 17 years, I never went south of like Soho. I just didn't.
Really?
Yep, absolutely. All my layovers, I absolutely I did not want to go there. It was just such a sick feeling. Like I didn't want to be a tourist. I didn't want to have nothing to do with it. It was only about 4 years ago that I had a long layover in Manhattan, and we stay right there at Wall Street, literally 3 blocks from Ground Zero. And I finally went and I looked at it and kind of made a little bit of my peace with it. But, like this year, I know it's the 20th anniversary. I've told my family, I'm like, if any of that stuff comes on TV, just change the channel. I'm not interested. I don't want to watch it. It's too raw. 20 years later, I cannot watch it and not have that absolutely devastate me all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not alone in that. I've spoken with quite a few aviators over the past few weeks and months because this is the anniversary. And with everything that's going on in the world, it just seems like there's a generation that sees it as this enormous act that changed everything. But for those of us that were in the industry at the time, it really is a completely different feeling. It's completely different to us. And some people said, yeah, I was flying that day and I saw it, and I'm not going to let the acts of an extreme sector of a particular terrorist organization dictate how I think about the world and how about people. And then there are those of us that it was so damaging to what we have a passion for, this industry that we protect. We protect this industry so much. And to hear you say that it affected you so much that even to this day, you would rather not relive that experience, because it's not just a documentary or a movie or a remembrance video for you. It's very real. You were flying. You were there, and I appreciate you telling us about that and sharing that with us.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you also. And it seems pretty clear after what you just expressed that how long did these effects of the events of that day affect you and your family?
I don't know if I can answer that, Tony, because I don't know how to measure it. I mean, the immediate aftermath was pretty, it was pretty powerful. And, I'm sure people have gone through traumatic things that have affected them for the rest of their lives. I think for me, I was too naive, and I think it struck something that was so precious and it was so dear to me. This is airplanes flying, something I have never not wanted to be associated with. So the fact that it was used the way it was, and the aftermath, I don't know how to say it. It has never not been a factor. Like, I mean, talking to my sons. Let me put it to you this way: I have two teenage kids, 17 and 15, and I remember that when they were in fourth or fifth grade, one of their silly classmates or something mocked. We'd gone to like some kind of 9/11 something, and they had picked up a little mug, or I forget what it was. Oh, I don't know what it was. It was a sweatshirt. It was a 9/11 sweatshirt that one of them had. And one of the other kids, you know how kids are, one of the kids said something pretty disparaging to him, which he didn't relate to me. And I remember just absolutely, like, I could feel me getting incensed. These are kids, and I wasn't even there. I just heard it secondhand, but I could feel myself getting just really like, no, that's sacred ground. Like, you can mock other things. You can say disparaging things about other things, but don't go there. That was just not an event that I can't make jokes about it. I can't laugh about it. I don't think anybody really should, but to me personally, it's too strong. The image is too strong. On a personal anecdote, I can tell you, because you're talking about how this affect your family. I mean, honestly, I'd mentioned the fact that it was my fiance. I can tell you, Tony, that, it really did change my view of the world a little bit. And I realized, sometimes, things like this happen, and none of us that morning expected to see what events, played out and how they affected us. Well, I had been with my girlfriend for a long time, and it was like, hey, are we going to get married? Well, she was nice enough not to ask it, but it was in the air. And I got to tell you, when you see something like this and you realize, this could all be over anytime, you never really know. It kind of it literally kicked me over the fence where, we got engaged and we got married, just a few months afterwards. And it was because, 9/11 was driving a lot of stuff where you go,
yeah, life
try
is
to make
short.
sense out of this. Yeah, life's short. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, thank you for sharing that. That's actually a positive that came out from a tragedy.
It is, and but I will always associate it was a link. There was that link to that dark day. Sure, something positive happened in my life, absolutely, no doubt about it. But it was not the way it was supposed to be.
Right.
I don't mean the marriage part. I'm talking the
right.
the
It
effect
shouldn't.
of it,
Yeah. The fact that it took that to have you reassess life. I mean, that's a part of grief, right? That's one of the stages of grief, is the reevaluation, and after the depression, you reassess your life and you start making decisions based upon the reassessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
We were, her and I were just kind of waking up and not really doing anything one morning, and we got a phone call, and that was when the Airbus crashed in New York. And it was almost like a month or 6 weeks after 9/11. And the immediate, of course, nobody knew why did this Airbus crash, which later we found out there was other reasons for it. But it was immediately right back to 9/11, and here we go again.
Yeah.
And I remember when I turned the TV on and watched that footage of that Airbus that crashed in New York, I remember my reaction was just, I don't know how to describe it, Tony. It was like way over the top, because I thought, here we go again. Like,
was this the Hudson flight?
No, this was, so it was an Airbus taking off, and I don't know if you remember and I don't know how much of this you want to share, but the FO unfortunately did like a full reversal, full left to full right rudder, snapped the rudder off, and they went down.
Right. And thus came out the warning in every single aircraft operating handbook: full deflection of the rudder in one direction, followed by a full deflection of the rudder in the opposite direction, may cause structural damage. Yeah, that's from that event.
Right.
Yeah.
But in any aircraft accident, it takes a while for them to even like figure out what could have gone wrong.
Sure.
And of course, the immediate thing was, here we go in New York again. But something that was completely unrelated to a terror attack, and it was just this immediate sick sensation inside of me where I thought, oh no, this can't be happening again. I can't do this again. I don't know. I don't know how to say it in words, but it was very, very powerful for me.
Yeah. And so, you were flying for many years before this happened. And we've recently been talking with fellow aviators about what it was like before all the security changes, when they had private security at the airport, where you just kind of got like going to a concert. You got kind of, check your backpack and make sure you don't have anything that's contraband, really, weapons and things like that. And then, walk your family to the gate, give them a goodbye kiss when they were traveling to go see Nana for Christmas, and you got to see them off, and you waited there and waved until the airplane pushed off the gate, and
anybody that wanted to go could go through security.
Could go through. Yeah. We had children visit us on the flight deck and say, "Oh yes, hi pilots. Oh yeah," and the captain would always take a moment and turn around, put down their coffee, and be like, "Oh, would you like to be a pilot someday? And here's some wings. And do you like gladiator movies?"
Yep.
And, all the things that we used to enjoy. Can you recall any of the other perks of the industry that were there before but are not anymore?
No, I don't know that I don't know that I can just off the top, recall a perk or something. I think probably for me the biggest loss was that innocence that will never come back. We'll never be able to reestablish something like that. And I think that is a collective thing. It's not just those of us that are in this industry, because now you can see that it's gone to, now you've seen it's gone to everybody's workplace. Everybody has to have a badge to get past that locked door. And everybody, and that was not like that. I mean, it really wasn't. We didn't have to live in a world in which we were so paranoid that somebody was going to come into your workplace and, carry on. So I don't know about perks. I know that's what you're asking, but I think honestly, I think what I miss the most is that incredible, I don't know, maybe kind of a silly naivety or something, that we had because it had never happened before, not at that scale.
Yeah. Yeah. It did change quite a bit for all of us, really.
Yes.
Now, your flying experiences prior to 9/11, like your typical sequence, was it much different than it was afterwards?
No, I don't think so.
And it just took time to get back to speed. Since you were on a layover in the middle of this, how long were you stuck in Atlanta?
5 days.
5 days.
Yeah, I was there for 5 days. And what's interesting is, so we checked in this downtown hotel. I wish I could remember what it was. It was the Hyatt, or it was the, one of the big names. And it was a prestigious layover, tallest downtown building in Atlanta. Really nice. I remember looking out of the view. I could see for miles and miles and miles. And what happened is the next day, everybody was sure that any high-rise building was a target. So there was a group of maybe 25, 30 flight attendants and maybe half as many pilots, where they basically organized themselves and went to the Super 8 motel in suburban Atlanta, 2-story buildings. They did not want to stay there anymore. So they organized it among themselves. And I guess I could have participated, but I didn't think anybody was going to fly into the building. It's not like I had wisdom. I'm doing the math thinking I'm not the only tall building here,
right.
It's a hotel. But what happened was it was very lonely. It after day one, when everybody vacated and businessmen went home because their meetings were canceled, downtown Atlanta was me, the captain that I was flying with, and 50 bums, street bums, it's the only people that were out in the street. And I remember on day 4, finally Macy's opened, and I was able to go into Macy's and buy socks and underwear, because I had only packed it was only supposed to be a 2-day trip out and back. And so on day 4, I'm like, well, I've run out of clean stuff. So I went to Macy's, and they finally opened that day because everything was locked up in downtown Atlanta. It was insane. There was nobody there, no cars, no businesses, nothing. And it was kind of a lonely existence. It was like, you're just in the room watching bad, negative news all day long, wishing you could go home. So I finally got out of there. Remind me if my memory is correct. 9/11 was on a Monday, and I left. I'm fairly certain I left on Saturday.
Wow. And so you were able to fly out of there, go home. How long before you returned to work?
One day.
Oh, so almost right away.
Yep. If my memory serves me right, we flew from Atlanta to Dallas, and then we deadheaded back to the West Coast. The deadhead flight was literally 70% uniformed crew members. All of us were stuck in different places.
Yeah.
So I did fly one live leg from Atlanta to Dallas. We deadheaded to the West Coast, back home to our domiciles, and then I had a day off. And then I went. My next sequence, I'll never forget this. We went from the West Coast to Dallas, and then Dallas to Boston on a flight that took us literally. If you've done that arrival from Dallas flying into Boston, you go right over Manhattan, and we could see the smoke plume. So this is like, now a week later, we could see the smoke plume from there, from all the way from Washington, D.C., we could see it.
Wow.
And then we flew literally right over the top of Manhattan and began our descent into Boston, which to me was so weird. Like, it seemed like, wait, shouldn't they be not allowing the planes flying? Obviously, we were still at 30-some thousand feet, but it was just so surreal. I remember who I was flying with. I remember the name of the crew that I was with, and I remember this like it was yesterday. It was just etched in my memory.
Yeah, yeah. And was there any hesitation from the crew to fly after 9/11?
I think those of us that were flying can probably kind of relate a little bit to the COVID thing. Those who were unable because they had too many issues in their head and whatever, they didn't. They stayed home and called off, and they didn't. And those of us that were out there flying, clearly we were okay to whatever degree it was. I don't know how to say it. But everywhere you went, Tony, on that particular Boston flight, when we got back to the West Coast, they had a thing at the San Francisco airport where it was like a prayer thing right there at the gate. It was weird. It was organized because the 2 airlines that flew into the towers were in adjoining terminals, and they kind of said, we need some solidarity, and they did this little prayer group between the 2 terminals. And I remember attending there, and there was airline people from both of us there, holding hands, trying to show some solidarity. And I remember so many people. I mean, I think all of us were in tears. It was insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah.
This is exactly what I was hoping to hear from all you wonderful captains that have agreed to talk to me, because it's difficult to, you can understand the logistics of what happened, why it happened, although we'll never really know. What could go through a person's mind to the point to where they would execute something like this. And that's not what we're here to do. We're here to just explain the finite details of what it was like for those that can never know. And unless you experienced it firsthand or you were involved directly, you can never know. I was a private pilot at the time, and just beginning to get my feet wet in this industry, getting ready to change careers. And I remember I was working a late shift the night before, and my wife was working an early morning shift the day of, and my phone rang at the house, and I thought, uh-oh, what's wrong? I'm, because she knows I'm be sleeping in. And she said, don't say anything. Just turn on the TV. I gotta go. And she left and got off the phone, and I turned the TV on, and I stood there in front of the television for what must have been at least 4 hours. I didn't even put down the remote. I just sat there in shock. And to this day, it hits me hard. I may not have been an airline pilot at the time, but I felt just so much more connected to what was happening simply because of what I was embarking on, my passion that had started a year earlier. So I can relate to what you're saying, but the way you've expressed your experiences and what you went through and still go through to this day is something that is absolutely priceless. And I just want to say thank you for sharing those.
Of course, Tony. Happy to share with you.
Yes, thank you. Final question. And I think you're in a very good position to express this, having 2 teenage sons of your own. How do you express the significance of how 9/11 changed not just our industry, but the world to a young person or a young aviator that was just not old enough 20 years ago or not around?
Yeah, I don't know, Tony. I mean, look, my dad was 14 when World War II ended, and he's German. So it was, this isn't about right or wrong. This is just a fact. He was a German, lived in Germany, was 14 when the war ended. And he was always very reserved. He would share, but he always tried to, I think, shield us from what the atrocity really was like. And I've kind of thought about this a few times, like why? We're not talking about the same thing. One is a war and one was
an act of war.
But it was a specific attack. It was just one attack. We didn't have to flee. We didn't have to, we didn't have our country demolished. So, but the fact that I could never grasp the gravity, I think, is part of it. Like, I don't think, like, he could tell me, but you're young, you're not really going to get it. And if you don't live it, you're certainly not going to get it. So, I think when it comes to the kids, we've tried to sort of emphasize a little bit what it was, and especially tell them the significance of what it was, why it was so important to us, why planes that we flew and people that we worked with lost their lives that day, and our industry was never the same again. But it's like you said, if you weren't living it at the time, if you weren't old enough to grasp it, and they weren't even alive, you're going to miss out on it. And that's okay too, because clearly it affected me a certain way, but it didn't affect all of us the same way. So, I try to tell them, look, this is a big deal to me. The world has really never been the same since. But, I could also be slightly tainted in my, in my filters and thinking, I'm making a bigger deal out of it than it really was, in terms of saying, things like this have happened in the world, big events that have changed the world, and they continue to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe it's just in the expression of respect that we must maintain that can be an example for them. Yeah. Well, sir, I thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us.
My pleasure,
it has
Tony.
been absolutely enlightening to hear your story, and I'm just so grateful that you agreed to share it with us.
Happy to share with you, Tony. Always good to see you and talking to you, and good luck on your podcast. And hope we get to fly real soon.
Yes, we'll have to make a point to make that happen.
Okay, Tony.
Minimum